You're here for the same reason that I'm running. It's because you love this country and you fear the direction that it's headed. I do not think it's hyperbolic to say that right now that what we're experiencing in this country is a very threat to our constitutional republic. We are on a path. One path leads down the path we're going right now, which is this neo-cultural Marxist authoritarianism. We have all experienced it for the last 3.5 years. Unfortunately, the roots of it go way further than that. The other path goes back to that shining city on the hill, a republic if we can keep it, which is what our founding fathers bequeathed us for. So in my campaign, I say God, family, country. That's not a platitude to me. Those are the 3 hills worth dying on. I have served God. I've sometimes been a prodigal son and have needed to be led back onto that path. I've also served my family, not always with the grace that they deserve, but I've been there for them. What I have not done is serve my country. And our country right now needs every able-bodied patriot to get off the couch, turn off the remote, and go do something about this. This country belongs to us, we the people. It's time that we speak up and demand that the people who are elected, who think there are betters and inflict God, the people, government on its head, understand that they account to us. They serve us. So it's for this reason that I chose to run, because I had 2 awakenings. One was when then candidate Donald John Trump came down that escalator and he said that we could make America great again. And all of a sudden there was this realization that our betters had been selling out our country and profiting richly on the way down. And that the Republicans were equally complicit, that there was a uniparty, an establishment. They did not espouse our values, even though they had an R behind their name. The other awakening I had was during the COVID lockdowns, when they told us that our work was unessential, that our places of worship were closed, that our kids couldn't go to school, they had to be masked, they had to be socially distanced, they had to take an experimental gene therapy. Forget about science and immunity. They then went after people praying the rosary outside of abortion clinics. They called parents who petitioned their school boards domestic terrorists and put them on a watch list. And then for people who felt like they were invited into the people's house, they've thrown out due process and they've locked them up as political prisoners. This cannot stand. It was personally egregious to me when I was told by my Republican governor that I was not allowed to take out my disabled wife for our daily visit. For 3 months, I had to explain to a woman who has cognitive deficiencies through a window screen why she wasn't being punished. And something in me snapped, and I said, this is not the country I intend to leave to my kids and my grandkids. That's why I'm running.
Well, I too want to thank you all for being here on this very beautiful day that we have here, because we are very thankful for the rain. Chairman French, thank you very much for hosting this event. Thank you all for being here. Dana, thank you for moderating. My name is Craig Goldman, and I am running for Congress. I am born and raised here in Fort Worth. I'm a 5th-generation native of Texas, a 4th-generation native of Fort Worth. My family certainly has been part of the building in Fort Worth. For those of you that have watched us grow over the years, certainly my family has been part of that. I went to the University of Texas, and then my first job out of the University of Texas was going up to Washington, D.C. and working for Phil Gramm. I worked for Senator Gramm for 5 years. So if you want to know where I got my core beliefs as a young man, that's where I got them, working for Senator Phil Gramm. He was a fighter for conservative values in Washington, D.C. then. He's still a fighter for conservative values now. He's 82 years old. He still works harder than anybody in this room, I guarantee you, and he's doing remarkably well. For 10 years, I ran a small business with my father. We had a wine and specialty food store here in Fort Worth on Hewlin, where we met a payroll, we paid taxes, and we were part of the community. I joined the Cowtown Executive Board, where a group of businessmen got together to help give business to one another. I found a problem in our community in that there were thousands of kids going to Tarrant County College who couldn't afford to do so. They needed scholarships. There was no avenue for scholarships at the time. I met with Tarrant County College. We formed the Tarrant County College Foundation. I was on the founding board. We saw a problem in the community and we helped solve it. That board is still there. They give thousands of dollars to scholarships to kids who go to Tarrant County College to this day. That was about 20 years ago we founded that board. I also served on the Women's Center board. We're battered and abused women. We found a problem in this community. We're battered and abused women, had nowhere to go. So the Women's Center is there to help battered and abused women in this community as a place to go, to find shelter, to find clothing, to get trained on getting a job so they can live on their own. So I certainly have been part of this community. And that's why when Mark Shelton announced he wasn't going to run again, I decided to run for state representative. I've been a state representative for the last 10 years. I have been part of the Texas miracle that Greg Abbott talks about. It's why Greg Abbott has endorsed me. It's why former Governor Perry has endorsed me. And it's why Lieutenant Governor Patrick has endorsed me. We have done, I'm sure we'll talk about the issues, but what we have done the last 10 years, for all you people who are part of the Texas Republican Party, and the platform that you bring us every single session, the majority of those conservative issues that you bring to us, it is not easy to pass a bill in the Texas State House, let me tell you. It takes 76 votes. And almost every single one of those issues, whether it's ending abortion in the state of Texas, whether it's Second Amendment rights, whether it's, which was bringing in constitutional carry, whether it's balancing a budget, whether it's cutting property taxes, largest property tax cut in our nation's history, we've done it, and I've been a part of it. And I look forward to discussing it throughout this debate.
You describe yourself as a conservative fighter, but yet Texans for Fiscal Responsibility gives you a 52. Young Conservatives of Texas rates you as a 62. And Texas Right to Life gives you a 68. You're also listed on Texas Scorecard's Dirty Dozen Texas House members. Do you define that as conservative? And is that the record that you want to take to DC?
So one of my precinct chairs brought that up to me, and I said, based on what votes? And he was speechless. We can get into that, but he was speechless. Because everybody in my district knows that I have voted to end abortion in the state of Texas. I have voted for the Second Amendment to bring constitutional carry to the state of Texas. I mean, shockingly, there were over 20 states that passed constitutional carry before Texas did. A little embarrassing. But that bill started in the Texas House, and we passed it out of that House, and then the Senate passed it. Again, we cut your property taxes, $18 billion to your property taxes being cut. A balanced budget. This is the biggest problem in Washington, D.C. They don't have a balanced budget. They don't have a balanced budget amendment. We need to pass a balanced budget amendment in Washington, D.C. because we have to have a balanced budget because we can't suffice with a $34 trillion deficit. It's embarrassing.
So, Mr. Goldman is running on his record, and unfairly, I am running on his record as well. When the Texas voters vote for 86 Republicans in the House to 64 Democrats, and they demand 8 key party platforms, none of which they could address during the regular session, and despite the will of the voter, continue to elect Democratic committee chairs, pack certain committees with a Democrat majority, and oh, by the way, have the House parliamentarian, who happens to be the most important unelected official there, who can kill a vote with one swing of a pen, be an attorney from Barack Obama's White House, a known parliamentarian of the Travis County Democratic Party. I don't know how we can call that. Look, I agree. You need to look at Mr. Goldman's record, and I can show you something.
Mr. Oshea, do you support funding the war effort in Ukraine? This has been a big topic of debate. It's been a big topic this past week with some of these spending bills. Where do you stand on this issue?
I am a hard no, and I will tell you why. The U.S. has too often played interventionist. Vladimir Putin can be a bad guy, but he can also be the elected president of this country who's given us very clear red lines. A little lesson in history. In World War II, the western half of Ukraine fought with Nazi Germany. The eastern half of Ukraine fought with the Soviets. We lost hundreds of thousands of people in World War II. The Soviets lost tens of millions. They call that area the bloodland for a reason. There was no need for there to be a war. There was a peace treaty that was on the table early on. And I don't care how much money we throw at it, which is egregious to me, while we pay more attention to the eastern border of Ukraine than our own southern border. I don't care how much money we throw on it. Russia has shown They are outproducing all of NATO. The weapons are not available. The artillery rounds are not available. And more importantly, we are bleeding out Ukraine to the last woman and child. And there are not men in the field to fight back. That's the reality.
Where you were asked about whether or not you support this effort in Ukraine, you said that Putin, quote, isn't going to stop, and that anyone who thinks that he's going to stop hasn't studied history. Now, you added that by sending money and weapons to Ukraine now, that we are saving from having to use our troops later. The United States has spent about $75 billion in total, just ourselves, not including NATO and the EU, on sending to Ukraine. Additionally, the Deputy Prime Minister over there warned that, quote, they may have to postpone pay for public servants and pension payments to millions of its citizens if the EU and the United States fail to deliver promised financial aid. Now, you realize how that may sound to a lot of voters. So how will paying pensions stop Russia from invading?
Well, let's go back to that. So let's start with the issue that absolutely we have to spend money to defend our border first. What's happening on our southern border, and I was there about a month ago, is atrocious. Our federal government has told our federal border patrol officers to stand down, don't do their jobs. They're the most demoralized men and women getting paid by the United States government right now. It's awful. So what did Texas do? We responded. We allocated over $5 billion this past legislative session of your money we should not have spent. We didn't need to spend it, meaning that it's a federal government's job to defend that border, to put Border Patrol on there and tell illegals they are not allowed in. If they cross that border, to send them back where they came from. That's not happening on our border right now. And it's atrocious that our federal government is allowing that to happen. And the president and his administration is allowed it to happen. So first and foremost, we needed to send federal troops down there, federal border patrol down there to defend our border. Outside of that, though, the bill on the floor today in the U.S. Congress is one of them as to whether or not we fund Ukraine. And the answer is yes, we do. Why? Study your history. Okay, so the reason is why is you have to study your history to know where we're going. Adolf Hitler in the 1930s and 40s became an absolute tyrant. What was his number one thing he started to do? Take countries, one country after another. Austria, Czechoslovakia, Ukraine, and then Poland. When he said he wasn't going to do it anymore, and he did it. Vladimir Putin is the exact same person. He is taking 5 provinces already. He wants to take Ukraine, and he's not going to stop there. Because the very next border that he takes will be Poland. Because, and guess what? Poland as a member of NATO, then we have to respond. Not just respond with money and weapons. Then we'll respond with our men and women in uniform. So the very best we can do now, and we weaken Russia. Look how demoralized their army is fighting Ukraine. But we have to continue to support the men and women of Ukraine. Putin has come across the border and stolen babies. He's taken babies as hostage and taken them back to Russia. It is atrocious what's going on there, and we have to do what we can as the United States to defend our allies here in Ukraine.
I think it's egregious, the idea that we would throw the people into a charnel house to try and weaken Russia's military. And as I told Congresswoman Granger when I met with her last year to tell her I was going to run against her, we have done nothing but make them stronger. We have pushed Russia into the arms of China. They are showing that they are outproducing the entire NATO with military equipment, material. Their army is far from demoralized. In fact, you've got an entire Ukrainian battalion surrendering or being chopped up as they're in full-blown retreat. The defensive lines are cratering. And again, Ukraine is now calling up double amputees back up to the front because there are more 18 to 34-year-old male Ukrainians living outside of Ukraine so that they don't have to be thrown into that charnel house. If they go after Poland, that's a different game. Putin has never said that. He has always responded to Western aggression, first with the Bucharest summit, when President Bush said that Ukraine and Georgia was going to join NATO, and then again after the Maidan coup, which was led by our State Department and CIA, and then he invaded Crimea, and then now when we were threatening Ukraine to come into NATO again.
What would you do to handle the cartel's influence at our southern border and perhaps elicit Mexico's cooperation in limiting illegal entry?
Well, the answer is very simple. We shut down the border. Governor Abbott did that once before. I don't know why he's taken that off the table as far as something that he can do again. They rely on trade and commerce with us in order for their country to prosper. But unfortunately, what this federal government has done by opening the border and ceding control of not only our border but our interior to the cartels is that they've made Mexico a failed narco state. Now, I don't know that the people of Mexico were deserving of it. I certainly know the people of the United States were not deserving it, with the fentanyl and the trafficking and everything else that comes in as a result of it, including the suppressed wages of the working class, because we're paroling people in as fast as we can and giving them work permits right now. And oh, by the way, now they're going to be using those Social Security cards and they're going to vote. And they're going to vote in part here in Texas because this Texas House did not vote to support SJ 35. It was a special resolution that said that only U.S. citizens can vote in Texas elections. It passed the House, Senate 29-1. It died in the House. Mr. Goldman voted president, not voting on it. No, please, let's be respectful. So, as a congressperson, I can tell you easily what I would do. I would vote to shut down the government before they shut down the border. That's what Congress has the power.
You list the border as one of your top priorities.
My top priority.
Yes, your top priority. But going to what Mr. Oshea was just talking about, you did vote against Representative Tinderholt's amendment. That was HB 3782. That would have removed this very problematic provision that was empowering Democrats that had opposed GOP's previous work in securing the border. And they were going to get essentially an equal number of seats on what was a border protection task force that the bill was seeking to establish. So the question is, why should lawmakers who oppose securing the border sit on a border protection task force?
Let's be very clear what we've done for the border. Like I said, since I've been in the state legislature the last 10 years, we have spent over $15 billion of Texas taxpayer money to defend our border, to hire more DPS troopers to go down there, to send our Texas Guard down there. Now, before they used to be deterrents. That was the only purpose of being there, until we passed this last special session, a law that allows them to arrest anybody who comes across that border illegally. That, of course, is being fought in the courts, but we passed that bill this last special session. Here's what I'm going to do when I'm a congressman. Number one, no amnesty for anyone here illegally. Two, if you're here illegally, you get sent back home. We know where a lot of these are because there's a lot of these sanctuary cities that are housing them, feeding them, clothing them, sending them to schools or in our hospitals. Number three, pass a federal law like we've done at the state level saying no sanctuary cities. We passed that law several sessions ago that no city in the state of Texas can be a sanctuary city anymore. We had them. We passed a law to ban them. I want to pass a federal law. Fourth, to tell Mexico all these illegal immigrants that are coming across that border need to stay in Mexico. They are not allowed in our country. And then we have to set financial sanctions against Mexico until they keep these illegals in their own country and not let them flow through their country because they're crossing their southern border as well and coming all the way to the northern border. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been part of the solution to secure our border, and I will continue to be that as your United States Congressman.
So apparently, after 3 years and 3 special sessions, they stopped killing border security bills because in the regular session, there were 3 bills in the House that they killed. And while State Representative Goldman is not alone in the House, he was the caucus chair, and I never once heard him go to the sticks or proudly fight to actually secure our borders. It wasn't until SB 3 and SB 4, meaning those were Senate bills. Those Senate bills were always on the table. They've been on the table for over years. So apparently 10 million illegal aliens was okay, 10 million and one was not enough, or too much. And then on top of it, you notice being defended in the courts right now. Guess what? Being defended in the courts by our Attorney General, who they prioritize impeaching over actually securing our border.
Why were these border issues having such a struggle in getting greenlit by your Republican leadership team in office?
It's not a matter of getting greenlit. It's a matter of finding 76 votes for anything. And again, I'm telling you, on any single issue, those of you who've been down in work session before, on any single issue, getting 76 votes is extremely difficult, even with 85 or 86 members in the Republican caucus. Texas is a big state. We're all not alike, shockingly. But those who live in North Texas vote differently sometimes than people who live in El Paso, that live down in the valley, that live in East Texas, live in West Texas. It's extremely difficult. I will say one thing about what Mr. Oshea said about the Attorney General fighting the law that we passed to have arresting authority. His Solicitor General, the Attorney General, Solicitor General, our Solicitor General, his right-hand man, said we went too far with that bill and we shouldn't have passed it. I absolutely support a warrant being necessary. And the problem is our U.S. government, there's actually occasions where they did not obtain the warrant to spy on their own citizens.
Over 3 million abuses.
Absolutely atrocious. And so absolutely they have to obtain a warrant, in my opinion. That's the way I would vote.
Mr. Oshea.
I would go actually a little stronger than that, because in fact the FBI attorney that you mentioned that sought the FISA warrant against Carter Page actually took and changed the wording so that he was actually an asset of the intelligence community, and they changed it to say it's not. Candidly speaking, the Patriot Act has been an abysmal failure. These people have been shown that they cannot be trusted with this power, and I demand that we institute and stand for our Fourth Amendment rights. These people, I'm less fearful of a terrorist attack than I am of my own federal government right now. And that's
how I'll be in Washington, D.C. exactly how I was in the U.S. House, in that you follow the Constitution. You follow the Constitution. The Constitution presented to us in the Texas House when the articles of impeachment, again, articles of impeachment did not say innocent or guilty. There's not one member of the Texas House that voted innocent or guilty in that occasion. They said, as members of a grand jury, is there enough evidence for there to be a trial? Okay? So that is what the Senate did. They said he was not guilty. He's still our Attorney General. And then he goes on. Not one time did I ever say Ken Paxton was innocent or guilty. We follow the Constitution. And that's what I'll do as a United States Congressman, is follow the Constitution on every single vote.
I want to give you, Mr. Oshea, 1 minute rebuttal. Then I'll have a question for you with Representative Goldman having a rebuttal.
So the impeachment of our Attorney General was in coordination with the Democrats. There was not a single Republican voter I know of who was calling for the ouster of our Attorney General. In fact, he was our America First fighter who was pushing back on this unconstitutional government that was infringing on and encroaching on our rights. And I would also direct State Representative Goldman to Texas Code 665, which says, let me be verbatim, an officer in the state may not be removed from office for an act the officer may have committed before the officer's election to office. So it was an illegal impeachment, and it was one that would make the kangaroo courts of the anti-republics blush.
What do you tell these people to help restore their faith in our flawed ability to operate this system of government?
So first of all, I tell them that I share their fears and I share their suspicion and their anger at our God-given rights. Again, the very basic founding principle of this country, that all men were created with God-given rights and they were to be protected by their government, not threatened or not doled out by their government. The other thing I would say is that they'll know that they will always have one person who will vote the right way to protect those rights, because it's the whole reason why I'm actually running, because I have to go meet my maker with a clear conscience. And as I said before, this is not the country I'm leaving behind to my kids and my grandkids.
What do we do to protect women's sports, to protect these spaces for our daughters and even our young men going through high school and college? What can be done in the House as a way to push back against this?
Well, again, you have the power of the purse, and it's an interesting question to bring up given the fact that the city of Fort Worth canceled this morning an event that was going to be held by detransitioners explaining the evils and the dangers of going through the transition process. And in fact, I volunteered my office, and we actually had that meeting this morning over there. What I would say is that we have turned our face on God. It is very clear. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, give unto God what is God's. Well, guess what? Who's created in God's image? Caesar's image is on that denarius. We're created in the image of God. So we need people in Congress who are unflinching and willing to say that we are dealing with people with mental illnesses by affirming their illnesses. That is not humane. That is not compassionate. And then I don't understand how liberal Democratic women are okay with being erased birthing people? Are you kidding me? Again, it's very easy to allocate or strip money out of things that go to this, but instead what we ended up doing was passing a tremendous budget that weaponized the government and funded all of these woke programs, and that absolutely needs to be cut out immediately.
Representative Goldman comments as well, because we are funding this. We're funding this in the state of Texas as well. So if we're having a difficulty in pushing back on this from Austin, how is this going to be accomplished by you going to Congress?
Well, again, it's taking what we've done in Austin and passing legislation at the federal level. We passed a bill this last legislative session that say no women in men's sports, no men in women's sports. We passed it. We passed another bill that says there's no gender transitioning if you're under 18. We passed it. They haven't at the federal level. In fact, they're allowing President Biden and his administration get away with doing this, and I don't understand it. The biggest problem I think we have is the Republican conference and the U.S. Congress is not unified against these items. They're too busy infighting instead of focusing on these type of issues. They have the power of committee hearings. They can bring these Biden administrations in front of their committees at any time and ask them questions and ask them why and how and where. But they're not doing it. And so we have to have legislation like we've passed in Austin at the federal level to make sure that, one, you can't transition under 18, certainly, and men play in men's sports and women play in women's sports.
Would you like a 1 minute rebuttal to that, Mr. Oshea?
Yes, please. So it's true that after not passing during the general session that a bill was passed, which was a Republican priority, saying no gender modification surgery for kids. However, there was also a Mental Health Act called 1898 in the House, and it said that there was going to be government grant money given to kids for their mental health. State Representative Tony Tinderholt brought up an amendment which said that it would not be used for any healthcare providers or agencies that performed any kind of gender reassignment surgery or services to the kids. It got struck down on a point of order raised by another state representative and seconded by our Speaker of the House, Dave Phelan. It then got modified, and a second amendment came up that said that there would be no money going to healthcare providers who did anything other than affirm the biological sex of the child in their treatment, and it went to a vote, and Mr. Goldman voted no on that amendment.
To ask you a follow-up, Representative Goldman, why did you vote no on that amendment?
I don't recall.
But that amendment, did that amendment not come forward?
I don't recall, though, to be honest.
HB
I really don't.
1898.
So you don't recall the amendment coming forward, or you don't recall how you voted?
I don't recall the amendment. There's 6,000 bills and thousands of amendments come before us every single
That's kind
day.
of a big one, though, I think.
I don't recall. I honestly don't recall.
Now, what would you do to relieve the tax burden for Americans and put Washington on a more fiscally sustainable path?
Well, first of all, President Trump's tax cuts, which is what led to that increase in tax collections, because counter to what the mainstream media tells you, that was not a tax cut for the wealthy. That was a tax cut experienced across the board. And not only do tax cuts not result in lesser tax collections, it actually results in economic growth, which fuels tax collections, as evidenced by the fact that since 2017, the taxes have gone up. Now, unfortunately, Bidenomics has taken hold, and 2023 is not going to turn out to be the same. So the first thing that needs to be done is that President Trump's tax cuts from 2017 need to be reapproved because they're going to sunset at the end of 2025. The second thing I would say is that the other pressure, the unfair accrual tax that nobody talks about, is inflation. Because while President Biden has said that he's not going to tax anybody under $400,000, which is conveniently just the number that he makes, it also, every single one of his policies, from energy to this reckless government spending, has devalued the dollar at the same time that he's opened up the borders and allowed all this flood of illegal aliens who they are now, as I said, paroling in and granting work visas. So the working class are not only losing their jobs and having to compete and having their wages suppressed, you have now their dollar buying 80 cents on the dollar what it did before. And I know the state of Texas prides itself on the fact that it has a surplus. In my mind, if we have a budget surplus, it means we're overtaxed.
Thank you. Mr. Oshea, to Representative Goldman.
And And John, we agreed with you, and that's why we had an $18 billion property tax cut. We took part of the surplus, we kept the other half for next session, we didn't spend it. We gave the citizens of Texas an $18 billion property tax cut, the largest property tax cut of any state in our nation's history. So these are the type of ideas I'm going to take to Washington, D.C. I am always have been in the Texas House, always will be at the federal government, going to vote for a tax cut. There's no question in my mind. We spend way too much money, and we need to keep more of the money that we make. Every single dollar that you earn is your dollar, it's not the federal government's dollar. And so I am always going to be for tax cuts. I'm always going to be to cut spending. Like I said, we have a balanced budget in the Texas State House. We need a balanced budget in the federal government. We need to cut spending. How do we do that? Like I said, one, eliminate the Department of Education, $80 billion right there. But two, I sat, again, another awesome idea I want to take to Washington, D.C. I sat on a committee called the Sunset Commission. What does that do? Every single 10 years, 30 agencies come in front of the committee. There are 5 members of the Texas House and 5 members of the Texas Senate. You serve on it for, I think, 2-3 years. And those agencies come before that commission, before that committee, and basically make a case of support for every single dollar that they are given. And then we make changes to what we do with them as a result. There's no oversight of any dollars that are allocated to any agency at the federal government. That needs to change. Every single dollar that's allocated to any single agency they need to stand up and say, this is well money spent, because I guarantee we can find a ton of savings in a bunch of agencies if we had oversight over the money that we give them.
No more rating. That's it.
Do you have a response, 1-minute response, Mr. Oshea?
I do. I find it kind of ironic to have somebody talk about their fiscal conservatism when they just were part of the budget that was a $320 billion plus biannual budget representing a 35% increase. And oh, by the way, I'm grateful that they deigned to give us $18 billion of that surplus back. It was $11 billion from last year. It was $5 billion from the year before. What they should have done is turned around and given us all the money back. It belonged to us.
So, Representative Goldman, there's SJR 35, Senate Joint Resolution. You have been accused of voting present to help Democrats in killing a bill that proposed a constitutional amendment clarifying that a voter must be a United States citizen. Can you explain your vote on that and your position on that requirement?
Yes, so those of you who watch the House proceedings know the Speaker is not always in the chair as presiding officer. So I've been asked the last several sessions to be that person when the Speaker isn't there. That person doesn't vote. So when we had that resolution up, it needs 100 votes to pass. Of course, every single Democrat was going to vote against it, so it was not going to pass. It got barely over 80 votes. And so, again, I was presiding officer. You don't vote when you're presiding officer. But you talk about election integrity. 2017, I passed in the House the strongest election integrity bill in Texas history at the time. To make what was a misdemeanor, if you were performing elections, or if you were going around, what they were doing in South Texas, they were going around and harvesting votes. They were getting people to sign iPads on a fake premise saying, are you pro-American? And they sign it. And then they were going around and registering. They knew they weren't registered to vote. They were then taking their signatures, getting them registered to vote, and then chasing the mailman and taking their voter registration cards out and voting with them by mail because of his signature. We passed a bill, I authored it in the House, to change it from a misdemeanor to a felony at the time. The strongest election integrity bill in Texas history.
Thank you, Representative Goldman. 1-minute response for you, Mr. Oshea.
So I find it interesting that he couldn't remember his vote on an amendment, but he remembers exactly that he was chairing at that point. I will tell you to look at the ledger. It has a C by your name if you are chairing at that point in time. He, in fact, wasn't. It had 88 votes, so he was one of 12 potential voters who could have passed it. And the other thing I will say is I will direct you to a piece of video that shows a Speaker of the House voting from the gap with the gavel in hand, because Dave Phelan couldn't wait to be the first vote cast for Ken Paxton's impeachment.
Do you want to respond to that, Representative Goldman? My final question for both of you, and this has to do with China. And this is not just a huge issue, obviously, nationally, but it's a big issue here in Texas. So I'm going to start with you first, Mr. Oshea, and then I'm going to go to you, Representative Goldman. In 2023 alone, CBP reports that 37,000 illegally injured Chinese nationals were encountered at the border. They're the fastest growing group of illegal aliens entering the U.S. every month. There's a lot of questions about national security kind of wrapped up in this, which is why I'm giving you these figures. In the meantime, Transparency USA has reported that the CCP has expanded its operations and documented 15 cases of China-related donations infiltrating Texas politics via various political action committees. Now, in addition to exerting political influence, China is also buying up land in Texas. Since 2015, per the Agricultural Foreign Investment Disclosure Act, foreign holdings have increased, on average, 2.2 million acres per year. Do you believe, Mr. Oshea, that foreign entities, particularly geopolitical enemies, should be allowed to buy American land?
No, I do not. And in fact, I think that the extent of China's involvement and influence peddling in this country has reached epic proportions. They practice a policy called unrestricted warfare, and they're engaged in it right now. You have to go no further than Joe Biden's presidential library at the University of Pennsylvania, where they were largely funded by donations from Chinese Communist Party members. In fact, you will also find that the Republican and Democrat parties alike take money from Sequoia Capital, which is equally trying to buy influence. So why on earth, when China is an existential threat, they've declared a people's war against the United States, not us, them, in 2019, why we would allow them to buy up our farmland and in fact even consider a contract for the state with DJI, the Chinese Communist Party controlled drone company, to fly drones over our state because I guess the balloons were just too inconvenient? No, it's egregious. We need to deal with the Chinese influence, and I will note that there was a bill passed in the Senate that tackled just exactly this subject, and once again, like all the conservative legislation that comes out of the Senate, it died in the House.
Is that the Colhurst bill you're referencing? Thank you, Mr. Oshea. Representative Goldman, on this issue of China buying land, I want to touch on that Colhurst bill that barred such purchase. Where were you on the passage of that bill?
I was for it.
And I understand that it was altered significantly. It went back and forth, and then ultimately it was kind of watered down. Is that a correct understanding?
I don't recall if it was watered down.
Where do you believe that foreign entities should, like political, geopolitical opponents like China, should be able to buy?
Not our enemies. I mean, China is not our friend. Russia is not our friend. We have a lot of enemies out there in this world, and that's why, again, I'll stand by my support for Ukraine, and this is why we have to be careful of what we do with China. And like I said, I was down at the border about a month ago. Their number one concern wasn't everybody that was coming across the border. Their number one concern were the Chinese nationals who were coming across the border because they were in their 20s and their 30s, military-age kids coming across our border. And because of our federal border patrol policy, what happens is when they come across that border, they're processed, meaning fingerprinted, tried to be ID'd. Of course, none of these Chinese nationals have any ID. And then they're released out in the wild. And we don't know where they go. They're told, come back in 2 or 3 years for asylum. It's absolutely, there's not a nation in the world that allows this to happen, and it's happening here in the United States. And the Biden administration has allowed it to happen. So we did all that we could as the state of Texas to stop this, but we can't compete with the federal government when it comes to that. Let me tell you another problem about China. So again, identifying the problem, fentanyl. Before last legislative session, I realized that fentanyl not only was a problem in our country, but a major problem in our state. And by talking with DPS and talking with DAs across the state, we formulated a bill that the governor quickly got behind to pass the strongest fentanyl legislation in our nation. What does it do? It makes anyone who's distributing or dealing fentanyl, make it a felony. Where was the first case? Right here in Tarrant County. Thank you, DA Sorrells. So again, it's seeing a problem. And where's that fentanyl made? China. It's synthetically made in China, comes across the ocean, goes through 3 cartel families in Mexico, and comes across our border. And our federal government is doing nothing about it, as it has become the #1 killer of 18 to 45-year-olds in our country. China knows they're killing our kids. Our federal government knows it's killing our kids, yet they do nothing about it.
Mr. Oshea, would you? My battery's dead.
Oh.
One response.
Yeah, what I would just say is that if State Representative Goldman understands that China is an existential threat to this country the way that I believe and agree with him it is, then maybe he ought to ask his brother to stop being a registered lobbyist for DJI.
Well, I too want to thank you again. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Chairman French. Thank all of you. It's a very good discussion. I thank you all very much for being here today. Like I said, I cut my teeth as a young person being a Republican. I watched Ronald Reagan on TV. There was a different time in the 80s. We all were certainly, that there was a pride in our country. We all were proud to be an American back then. Lee Greenwood, by the way, supporter of mine, if you want. Actually, the other day, he actually signed the Bibles he does. So if you want a signed Bible, let me know. I can get you a signed Bible from Lee Greenwood. But there was a pride in our country that we're missing now. And we need to restore that pride in the country. And it starts with leadership in Washington, D.C. We don't have it now with Joe Biden and the Biden administration. There's very little pride in our country. So absolutely, we need Donald Trump back in there next year. We need the Trump administration. We need their policies. We need the federal judges that Trump was able to put in across our country. Because we all know that pride in our country is existential to our happiness at home, in our schools, and amongst our families. And so I want to take the problems that I saw in Texas and have been a part of solving those problems and take those to Washington, D.C. People have asked me, what's the most important bill you've ever passed? It's very simple. It's called Molly Jane's Law. Molly Jane Matheson was a young student here who was brutally assaulted and murdered. Her parents I grew up with. Her mom calls me, Craig, you need to pass a law to make it to where no other girl dies the way Molly Jane did. And I'm thinking, Tracy, murder's illegal in the state of Texas. Well, what we did is we went to work. And what we realized is this murderer had sexually abused 4 other women in the state of Texas. Ridiculous. And he was let back out on the streets again. By studying what these police officers did and these investigators did and what needed to change, we passed Molly Jane's Law, and I encourage you to go home and look it up. Because it's the proudest, most important bill I've ever passed. It's certainly the #1 bill I will file at the federal level to get sexual abusers off the streets. And 1 month after we passed that bill, a gentleman was caught in Tarrant County. Again, thank you, Phil Sorrells, because he prosecuted him and put him away. But we have to get these people off the street. Fentanyl, I told you that I saw a problem with fentanyl, killing 18 to 45-year-olds, not only in our state, but in our country. We need a national federal fentanyl bill to say if you're dealing or distributing fentanyl, it's a felony and you're going to prison. There's case after case now in Texas where we've done that. I've worked closely with police. That's why the Fort Worth Police Association has endorsed me. Like I said, to pass a bill to say you're not going to defund the police. We actually passed a bill this session. I saw a problem with bad paper license plates. July of 2025, you will no longer have paper license plates in the state of Texas. Auto dealers and the DMV said I couldn't do it. We passed the bill. Why? Because there's a criminal element. Because law enforcement got behind us and said we are for this because it's a major problem. And then when DPS told us what a major problem it was on the border, with the cartels coming across the border every single day and using fake paper license plates to commit crimes and going back across the border, and they were untraceable. So time and time again, I encourage you to go to my website, look at my record, look at what I've done. My entire adult life where I've identified a problem, I've come up with a solution. I've been able to do it in the Texas legislature. I'm certainly going to do it as a member of the U.S. Congress, and I'd be honored to have your vote. Thank you again very much for being here.
So I also want to thank Bo, Dana, yourself, and actually State Representative Goldman for agreeing to debate. Look, the field is now down to 2, and it's now a binary choice. And I agree with State Representative Goldman. I do encourage you to go look at his voting record, because I think that we have a problem in Washington, D.C. that's mirrored in Austin. When the state convention, with over 7,000 delegates in 2022, of which I was one, put up 8 Republican priorities for the 88th congressional session. 8. And they got 0 of them accomplished during the regular session. 0. I can read them off the top of my head if you like, and I know that there was a certain woman who's present here today that actually brought those party platforms to Representative Goldman. So I don't like to have this be like I'm personally attacking him. He has been nothing but ever polite to me. But what I will say is that there is a real contrast before you now. There is a civil war in the party in the state of Texas. And I like to characterize it as the America First Team Paxton side, and then there is the establishment Team Phelan side. You have a candidate who represents each one of those two camps. I think in visiting with the general public, I know which side the majority of the voters are favoring. I will also say this, regardless of who wins in this primary runoff, unequivocally, whoever one of us wins is far better than the Democratic alternative. So, but, however, there is a war in our Republican Party, and one side has to win and the other side has to lose. I am the outsider. I agree. I think I bring common business sense and visiting with the people to the table. I know another certain gentleman who stepped in off the sidelines and ran for his first race for president, did the same thing. I'm the America First candidate who's going to support President Trump's agenda. I'm endorsed by our Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who is fighting for our America First values. The choice is clear. Now you have a chance to choose. Thank you.